Welcome back to another video, and we're still walking through the different CSS rules and things that we can apply to our HTML to make it look better. In this video, we are going to look at our block elements, our inline elements, and then something else called Inline-Block, and basically see how we can apply different CSS styles and what styles we can apply to those. So in here, I have three images again, my castles from a previous video. And if I come in here and let's just generate some boilerplate code, and we can call this one display, we'll call it display property. And then let's go ahead and link our CSS file as well. Now within the body, we talked about this in a previous session, but within HTML, you have something called a block element and then something called a inline element. So if I come in here, and I say something like H1, this is a great castle. Okay, now if I save that and look at my page, you can see we get this block element here. And let's come over here. And inside of here, basically we could say any H1, inside of any H1, we're going to put a border, and we're just going to say 2 pixels solid black. So if I save that, you can see I get this is a great castle, and the border goes all the way around the entire thing. Now if I come in here and say, okay, well that's great. Well, what if I want this to be a little bit bigger? So let's say I want the height to be maybe 300 pixels. Save that. You can see that height actually changes as well. So that might even be a little bit extreme. Let's say 150 pixels. So there we go. That's our H1 element. Now, if I was to come below the H1 element and put a paragraph tag in here, and if I say lorem 30, save that, you can see I get this paragraph here. It also takes up the entire line. And if I come here, and then inside of my paragraph tag, let's add some styles here as well. And in here, let's add that same border. So you can see that is taking up the entire page again. Now, if I were to come down below this and add an image tag, and in this image, I want to say castle 1. Let's duplicate that line 2 more times, and I can say castle 2 and castle 3. And then down here, I can say maybe below that image, we'll add some span text. And in here, we'll just say lorem, not even 10, maybe like that. Now, if I copy that, paste it down 2 lines below, and then reload this, you can see we get our top H1 header box here. And that one, again, takes up the entire width, and then it's got our height applied. Then we have our P tag that, again, takes up the entire width, and we haven't applied any height to that one. And then after that, we have 3 image files of these castles that we have. And finally, at the way bottom, we have 3 different span texts that all kind of run together. And basically, if I were to come into here and make my image tags smaller, so if I say image, and we want every width, we want the width of every image to only be a maximum of 150 pixels. And then if I save that, you can see now all of my castles fit onto one row here, and then immediately it jumps into the text, and finally it finishes out the rest of the text on the next line because it's run out of room on that line. Now, the reason that these are all displaying on one line, and up here, these every element is getting its own line, even though obviously this is a great castle. You could fit a lot of text over here on the right and beneath it still. But because this is a block element, it's going to block out all of this space, which includes the maximum width allowed. We're an inline element. Let me go ahead and put a border on these span tags as well. If I copy that and paste it here, you can see the inline element is really only taking up as much room as is required to display it. So if I come into here and say, okay, this looks bad, I want to give it some spacing. So if I say padding of maybe 10. Let's see, if I say padding of 10 pixels and save that, you can see it spaced it all out. And on the top and the bottom, the padding has actually applied on the element, but it hasn't moved it. And what I mean by that, if I comment this line out, you can see my border right now is just below the castle pictures. But if I uncomment that line out and then save it again, well, now my border is just above the top of the or the bottom of that castle picture, but the text itself actually hasn't moved up and down. So if I were to come in here and say, okay, I need to push this down, margin, top, and that looks like it's what, maybe 5 or 6 pixels. So I can say 10 pixels just to be safe. And now you're thinking we're good to go, save it, and nothing happened. Why does nothing happen? What if I change that to 1,000 pixels? Still, nothing happens. No matter what you put for the top and the bottom margin on a inline element, which is going to include your anchor tags, your span tags, and then your IMG tags, no matter what value I put for the top and the bottom padding and margin and height, it can't take that, and it won't take that. And basically, the reason for that is because an inline element is meant to be positioned inside of a block element, and the block elements are used to control the height and the layout and the spacing. So there's actually a property in here that you can use, and it's called display. If I come in here and type display, you can see I've got block, contents, flex, flex root, grid, inline, and then inline block, flex, flexbox, a couple different. So block is going to be the default layout, the default display for a block element, like an H1. And then inline is going to be my default display element for a inline element. So if I save that, nothing is actually going to change, because even though I've now written this property in here, because span is actually an inline property to begin with, or an inline element rather to begin with, this span text is already going to have the inline displayed to it. So if I come down here and say block now, well, now look at that. We have our 100 pixel margin on the top, which is way too much. And then we have our 10 pixel padding on the side, and it's applied that 100 pixel and the padding. And we have the height and width values changing. Even I can come in here now and I could say height is equal to 50 pixels and save that, and you can see it's going to grow by 50 pixels. So basically, now I have these block items that I can display, or rather I have these inline elements that I can display in a block fashion. So with that being said, let's maybe decrease some of that a little bit. So up here, you have the same thing. You have this is a great castle, and then you have this guy. Now, what if I want these two to run together on the same line? Well, you can do that same thing. If you come up here, you can change the display to inline. And now you can see that border has shrunk and it only takes up half of that. And if I were to come down here and change this border or this display to inline as well, you can see it actually starts on the same line now. So I can display a block item in an inline display, and I can display an inline item or element in a block display. Now, what if, like down here, I've got these 3 block items, and I want the vertical padding and margin, but what if I still want them to display on the same line? Well, there's an option for that as well. So instead of block, if you do inline block, this is going to give you the margin and padding on the top and the bottom, as well as the ability to set the height and the ability to put them all on the same line. So if I expand that a little bit, you can see all 3 of these can end up on one line now. There's one more display property that I want to look at in this lecture, and let's go ahead and give a class name to one of those castles. So I'm going to just call it castle 1. Let's apply that class name here. So castle1, save that file, come back in here. Now for Castle 1, if I type display, and if I change this from the standard, which is going to be for an IMG from inline, if I change this to, well, I'll show you, I can change that to block as well. And now Castle 1 appears on a new line. But rather than doing inline or block like that, if I just change this to none, you can see now it's just not displayed at all. And not only is it not displayed at all, it didn't leave any room for it. Now, if you've been doing your reading, you may have also come across a visibility property. So if I set the visibility property, and if I set the visibility to hidden, and then save, you'll see that visibility hidden leaves a blank space where that is, where if I then change that from visibility hidden to visibility visible, and now save that, you can see the picture appears right in that blank space. But if I change it, instead of doing visibility hidden, if I change that to display none, that not only hides it, but it doesn't even display a blank gap or a space where it would be. So these are this is another handy display method to use sometimes when you're trying to readjust things and hide things based on the current state of your web page. So hopefully you've learned a good amount in this lecture, and the difference between block and inline elements makes sense. And hopefully the idea that you can display a block element in an inline display and an inline element in a block display, or you can do kind of a blend using the inline block display. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, feel free to review this video and then go ahead and read the reference material that I'll put down in this video's description. And I will see you in the next video.